of Business Mentorship, Keepin It Real, invest in yourself. Panel discussions answering your questions on business strategies and marketing tools by sharing our expertise to support and learn from one another. Our topic is how to maximize our reach as a podcast guest. And we're going to share a few suggestions from those who have been on our show as part of the Share Your Stories series. I'd like to introduce you to our panel guests. Beside me is Renee Besson, an accounting and advisory professional in her own firm. Below me is Mauricio Jimenez, who is a photographer and owner of Magic Vision Photography. And in your far right is Angelina Carleton, a coach and podcast host for Design Your Legacy. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
It's such a thrill to have all of us together. I really do appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today and sort of share your expertise. And I thought I would start with Mauricio, because I noticed that you created interest after our discussion and the interview by using social media. So tell us a little bit about what you did to increase your reach as our guest.
So definitely, Trish, the key is to share it.
Yes.
So after the interview, I shared the interview in all my social media, and immediately people get a lot of interest,
Right.
Almost 1,000 views. So it was absolutely awesome, and that is the way that we I get interest from people.
Right. And, did you get lots of comments from folks, Mauricio, as a result of, our conversation?
They love it. Very inspirational for a lot of people, because a lot of people, they want to start a business, or they use in the process to start a business. So, and actually I have to share that. I get a call from one lady that she was starting a business, and she asked me for tips how to grow the business, how I did it with my business. So it was good. It was great.
Oh, good. And Renee, you engaged your network before our interview. So why don't you share with the folks in our viewing and listening audience what you did to try to increase your reach?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So what I did was send an email blast to all of my contacts. So that's like my current clients, all my contacts from networking, just let them know that, we were doing the podcast. And so that just invigorated some enthusiasm for the event. And so it was very effective.
You know what I really loved about, because you were very thankfully you put me on the newsletter that you sent out to everyone. And what I really loved is you used the visual that I share as part of your content in your newsletter. Did you get any comments or any anyone reaching out as a result of the discussion that we had in our podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tagged you in my email blast, and so I had a guest, a former guest of yours, reach out to me, and it was really wonderful because it's just the whole thing about collaboration. And Trish, I know you're all about that. And so we got together over Zoom, and we'll be doing a collaborative webinar in the fall. So I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, it's been very positive.
Oh, that's great. Now, Angelina, you're also a podcast host. And so we share some of the, I interviewed a guest recently who was into marketing, and she said, you know what, Trish, this is the sexy stuff, being online and having our hair done and, connecting with our guests and sharing great ideas. But you and I both know what goes in behind the scenes, right? To not only connect with the guests, but to help amplify everybody's success. So are you able to share some of the things that some of your guests have done on your podcast show?
Yes, I can. And I think what you're referring to is oftentimes how they talk about in sales, we need to sell the sizzle in addition to the steak.
Yep.
to keep it exciting, because people learn the best when they are entertained. So a lot of the times, if we come from a very professional or an academic background, it's hard to shed that and become a little bit in what I call, to go into the improv mode of being humorous or being entertaining. Some people think that that's below us, but that's also what people need to see to engage and to relate. So I had thought about this question and I wrote down a couple of notes. I think a part of what has helped, I'm going to give you three things quickly. The first is on if somebody can upload a video to YouTube in addition to Apple Podcasts, there's a space for keywords. And I think that that is really useful if they can hone in on what their content is about, who their target audience is, and to take personal agency over those keywords compared to leaving those boxes blank. And those keywords can also be hashtags in social media. For instance, when Mauricio talked about how he's done very well with his social media outreach, the next item is, I think, show notes. And I don't know if you write show notes, Trish, but the art of sales copy takes a while. That joke, it only took me 8 years to become an overnight success. I think that if you can add show notes, and again, whether that's in social media or in the comments or the description box to what that podcast or the video is about, and whether that's opening a story loop and closing it, or something that is concise that lets the listener or viewer know what the content is about, I think always adds to whether or not they're going to click on and actually take the time to watch the content or listen to the podcast.
Right. That's very true. Now, I know that your guests have taken up some of the things that both Maurizio and Renee have provided us with. I wanted to ask both Maurizio and Renee another question, and that is, when you became a guest on any podcast show, do you feel that it's the responsibility of the podcast host to share all of the content? Or do you feel that it's a collaborative approach and that you also want to engage in tagging, say, your host and things of that nature? I mean, I know you had great success with yours. So, give us a little bit of insight into the background when you attend other podcasts.
I think it's both. It's like it's something that we need to do both, right? If you do your job and you do an excellent job, but I have to do my job as well. So it's good that you share it, but of course, if I want my neighbor, all my contacts to see what I did, it's my responsibility to share it with them.
That's a really great point. Do you see it as a marketing vehicle? So have you reshared our conversation? Because to Angelina's point, we both have a YouTube channel that we then share the podcast to, that's sort of like a library. So have you ever gone back to the library to reshare our discussion?
Definitely, yes, because that I always think that if we don't show it, we don't sell it.
Right. Yeah, so that's so true.
As much people see me in different interviews, when more and more people know about me and the thing that I do, and that's it.
That helps, right?
That's the beauty of sharing.
Right. Yeah. And what about you, Renee? How did you feel? Do you feel that, you mentioned collaboration in your discussion, but, maybe in terms of percentage, is it a 50-50 split, or is it 60-40, or what's your view on it?
You know what? I really feel that as much as the podcast host, they are doing the podcast and that is what they do. So they're going to share it to the best of their ability. But I feel that the real responsibility is left with the business owner. As similar, I wholeheartedly agree with what Maurizio is saying. If we don't make that effort to let people know in our community know, our network know what we're doing, and it reminds me of my own business, because I help business owners as an accountant, but I always let them know that at the end of the day, this is your business. Now I'm going to do my best, but it really is a collaborative effort between the two of us to make this thing work. And I think that the podcast is absolutely the same way. So you got to do your best to put it out there.
Right. And Angelina, now you've been at your podcast, Design Your Legacy, for quite some time. Maybe you can share what is one of the ways in which you attract guests to your particular podcast?
Oh, well, I think I've been podcasting for a year now. And if I could do it all over again, I would have started a couple of years ago compared to have been worried about public speaking, which I think they compared to skydiving. Attracting guests. I ask a lot of different people. And in my opening line, even though the topic is legacy for my coaching and advisory practice, one of my opening lines when I open up the podcast is that I want to invite people of all income levels and experiences so that there is a diversity of voices, because I think that each perspective brings value. I think a lot of the times if I listen to something and I find it interesting, I'll reach out to that individual or, and sometimes they say no, it's a 50-50 shot. They don't know me. And other times they're willing to embrace the opportunity, and other times they might sit for a month or 6 months and watch my other podcast episodes and then circle back to my surprise because they're thinking about it. It's like simmering in like the back burner of their mind.
Right. You know, Angelina brought up a really good point, and I'll pose the question to both Maurizio and Renee. Were you at all concerned with the public speaking aspect of, you know, I know that we've got a bit of confidence on whatever platform we're using in terms of social media, but do you feel that you had any reservations at all about sharing? Because our show is live and unscripted, as is this discussion. So was there any reservation at all to participate?
Renee, do you want to?
Yeah, for me, I do a lot of public speaking outside of my professional career as well. So not so much the public speaking part, but for me, it's the camera part. I'm not used to doing things on camera so much. And so I'm always cognizant of trying to be as natural as I can be on camera, but it's something that I'm still working on.
Right. What about you, Maurizio?
Well, I used to be the guy with the camera.
Yes,
right?
For sure.
So it's hard. Like it's different for me to be in front of the camera. But interesting is that being with the camera all the time in events and weddings and public events, people know me. People see me. I am most visual. Like people have the ability to see me more than I see them. Right. So that made me like a public person.
Right.
So I am used to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we're certainly glad that we've got you in front of the camera for a change, Maurizio, because I know that I've seen some of your wonderful posts on social media, and you seem like you're having a heck of a lot of fun at all those special events that you are, you know, taking photos of. So it's really wonderful to have you in front of the camera. Every
single event is an awesome event for me.
Yeah, that you can tell because, you know, any of the posts that you share are really quite engaging. And I wanted to ask Angelina, because, you know, part of what we do is taking snippets of our conversations and then drilling them down to something that can be shared on the various different social platforms to try to engage our audience. So we know that Maurizio is pretty good at doing editing and Photoshop and all of that sort of thing. And of course, Renee doesn't have to worry about that because she's got the numbers behind the scenes. But Angelina and I have to sort of, you know, do some editing and spruce things up a bit, or sex it up, as lots of people say. So maybe you can share with us, Angelina, who does your editing and how do you sort of add a little bit of, you know, pizzazz or sizzle to your conversations?
Well, I want to answer that, but I want to add to something Maurizio and you had talked about before regarding public speaking. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to add briefly that I like to give my guests the questions 7 days prior to, or at least 24 hours, just so that they can have the time to think about it. Because I've noticed that sometimes people do very well when they're spontaneous, but other people will freeze.
Yes.
And I didn't want that. And so what I've learned is if I can make them feel as comfortable as possible, they'll bring their best out. And if they bring their best out and they're laughing and having a good time, now the viewer and the listener, it's easier for them to feel like they're a part of that exchange.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
So to answer your question, I think it goes to my husband actually does the editing.
Ah.
But when I look for the 60-second spots or clips to put onto Instagram, it typically answers the question of what helps the viewer with a question around surviving, thriving, or a beautiful life moment. And that's what I'm looking for, because legacy in itself is kind of a boring topic, kind of like estate planning.
Right.
There's no sizzle to that unless you tell someone, I mean, let me take a step back for a moment. Unless somebody manipulates fear, and I don't necessarily want to do that. I know fear is a great motivator, but I don't necessarily want to go there. Right. But with surviving and thriving or beautiful moments, if I can find a 60-second clip where the guest speaker hones in on something that they say, a tweetable moment, whatever it is, then that is the moment that gets captured.
To share words of advice. So because you are three wonderful guests, I'm going to each of you to ask to share one word that will make up three words when we put them all together. So Mauricio, because we started with you with the first question, what would be your word of advice for our viewing and listening audience?
I will say consistency. To be consistent.
That's a really good word. And you know what? That's really good advice, because, whether we're a podcast host or a podcast guest, being consistent is really important. So that's a great word.
No, like I say, if you want to do something good at it, you have to be consistent.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Renee, what's your word?
Mine is trust. And it's just about trusting the process, right? Like if we're podcasting or doing other forms of marketing, just enjoy it, trust the process, and, put it out there, do your best. There's no need we want to be balanced while we do our best. We don't want to sort of get into that hamster wheel mode that, can affect our physical and mental health. So we just trust the process and the results will come.
That's really good advice, because you have to trust that the podcast host is going to shed you in the right light. And as the podcaster, I have to appreciate that you're going to bring something really valuable to the table that will be of interest to our viewing and listening audience. So really wonderful word, and very reciprocal for both guest and host. And Angelina, what would be your word?
So the three words, review the podcast. And what I mean by that is, as uncomfortable as it might be to go back and listen to it, because sometimes hearing our voice is like hearing our voice on an answering machine. It's very uncomfortable. But I think that if we can go back, there's so much we can learn about what it is we can do better. Because I think a lot of people have amazing ideas. So then it comes down to delivery.
Right.
And as much as it's uncomfortable to carry around a tape recorder or go back and listen to ourselves and figuring out where can we get more comfortable, where can we get more connection and presence in that moment. I think, again, that comes with time, consistency, trusting the process. And again, as uncomfortable as it is in the growing pains, it's to go back and to review your work at least once.
Well, that's really great advice. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to join me and answer our panel question, which was, how do we expand our reach as a podcast guest? And I certainly look forward to the opportunity to meet with each and every one of you again and expand your story and provide us with some new insight and some updates on what you're doing in your business. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
To our viewing and listening audience, I'd like to thank you for joining us in our panel discussion as we've answered the question on maximizing your reach as a podcast guest. I'm Trish Tonai, founder and host for the series. And if you'd like us to explore a business question, feel free to send a message through the contact page at ShareYourStories.online. And we invite you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Business Mentorship, Keepin It Real, where we introduce you to the person behind the logo and share their great ideas.